Okay, before we get into what is a special edition of things I like and fucking hate, a few things obviously need to be addressed. A lot of people weren't too keen on my video about the Resident Evil 4 chainsaw demo, and yeah, for the most part that one's on me. A good majority of what I said was untrue, mainly the second chainsaw guy not being there, and there was a decent number of people who let me know that. It's a good lesson as to why you don't review something without playing it more than once, but that being said, I don't disagree with all of it, and we'll get to that later in the video. You may have noticed things are a bit different this time, and that's because the game is actually real damn good, and I couldn't find 5 things I fucking hate. There's definitely a lot of things that I liked, but I'm not gonna pretend the game is completely perfect because it still isn't, and I want to address that. So instead, we're gonna count down the things that I like, while at the same time, the 3 things that I fucking hate. So let's find out how the new remake did as we look at... well, you get the idea by now.
You haven't changed. You just think you have.
The replay value. Again. In retrospect, I probably never should have titled this replay value as something that had to be changed in a previous video, as some people seem to have misinterpreted that. As mentioned in the past, one of the most noticeable issues with the original game was the lack of a real hard difficulty, and the fact that all the upgrades were basically given to you assuming you bought the treasure map. Obviously, this game has 2 hard difficulties, so it fixes that problem, and as for the treasures, let's just say things have changed a bit. You can still buy the map to find them, but doing that won't automatically get you all the upgrades, so you'll still have to make some decisions. The amount of money you get will depend on what gemstones you use, and thanks to the optional areas and side objectives, you likely won't see everything your first playthrough. The Blue Medallion side quest is expanded upon, the shooting range is a lot more fun this time, although it does include that RNG bullshit, so not exactly a plus there. But for the most part, there is a lot more to do. I'm sure a lot of people won't like how the striker no longer gives you enough ammo to last the whole game, but let's face it, that did make things a bit too easy. Sure, I may have played the original almost every year since it came out, but I can't say my subsequent playthroughs have changed that much. Needless to say, with the remake, that's not gonna be an issue.
Well done! You've proven yourself reliable.
No laser sight. For over a decade now, fans have been baffled by one specific title known as Resident Evil 6. This was for a number of obvious reasons, but one thing that not that many people mentioned was you didn't start out with the laser sight seen in the 2 previous games. It was still in the game and free to use, but for whatever reason it wasn't the default option. I'd assume they must have thought the new thing was better, but does anybody really agree with that? Well, I guess Capcom does, because after that game, it was mostly gone. It was eventually brought back for the Resi 2 remake as an attachment for certain handguns, if you could find it, and yes, it can be obtained in the Resi 4 remake through a trade. So basically they've taken the preferred aiming method by most people and turned it into something that they think you should have to earn.
Terribly ingenious, highly imaginative, incredibly inventive.
And I know the logic to this is if you prefer it, it makes the game easier, it should have to be unlocked and all that shit, but even if that's the case, you can only put it on certain handguns. It's bad enough that it's exclusive to only handguns, but the 2 best guns in the game can't fucking use it. I understand the Red 9 doesn't look like it could use it, and realism and all that, but why not the Blacktail? Why not the fucking Blacktail? Why can't my favorite fucking gun use the laser sight? Is it because they think it makes the game too easy? Because it's better or something? Of course, IGN thinks it's just great, refusing to fault the game for anything, but overall, it's a design philosophy I don't like, and I'm not afraid to say something I fucking hate.
Hola, Luis here. You guys still around?
Well, I wanted to go home, but Ashley just had to see this castle first.
Redesigned Areas. Back on the positive side of things, one of the best things about this game, and what I expect from any remake, is not being afraid to remove stuff that didn't work in the original. Not to say that everything they cut was good, I really hope that U3 appears in separate ways, but overall, the redesign is quite good. The water room is no longer a tragedy that makes you question what they were thinking. The lake is heavily expanded upon, making it more of an open area to explore, and the island as a whole is a lot better paced, as is most of the game, as some sections went on way too long. I still don't know why that was a thing in the original, but as expected, the remake has sorted that out, and everything flows a lot better. The second village you enter used to just be a boring section when you shoot medallions, and now it's heavily expanded upon and introduces a new enemy. One of my favorite additions, and I know some people won't agree with this, is the new minecart section. Yeah, the original was still fantastic, but this one makes it more of an on-rail shooter, a nice change of pace, and it includes Lewis. I mean, who could not love this? However, for a game that's trying to be more, realistic, some of them have exploding barrels with them in the minecarts. Keep in mind, the section that followed this, being the big Salazar statue that chases you, was not included in the remake. If it's because they thought it was too stupid, I don't think that makes any sense. Obviously, there's gonna be a few things I'd wish they'd kept in, but as far as being cohesive goes, it's a big improvement. Areas flow better, stuff nobody liked is completely changed or just gone, and for a remake, that's exactly what I expect. It's too bad the last two didn't get that memo, and instead just cut stuff out. What a shame that was.
I'm hearing the president's orders in. That went well.
Ashley can't die. Still not the most important thing in my opinion, but probably for many others, is Ashley. This is because A, she was fucking annoying, and B, she had to be protected. I stated in a previous video that they could fix this by simply not letting her take real damage, and for the most part, that's exactly what they did. She can still be carried away, and that is a good thing, because there should be some challenge, and the only other danger is her being incapacitated, which doesn't really affect anything. There is still a command to have her spread out in an attempt to avoid this, and... wait a minute. That didn't sound right. There is still a command to have her run away from you in an attempt to avoid this, but you don't really need it that much. Having Ashley with you no longer affects anything, and since she isn't annoying this time, and they have dialogue, I dare say her character is now good. I never minded her as much as most people seem to, but there's no denying the improvement. I still say the original was one of the best versions of this kind of thing, but let's face it, there is no good version of this, and the best course of action was to just get rid of it. That's what they did, and it's still something I like.
You vulgar, utterly uncivilized mongrel!
Headshots. Okay, here it is. The thing that got so many people mad when I said this about the demo, and my opinion stands.
Are you out of your fucking mind?
Now, I am not somebody to delete comments. I don't believe in that, so I won't. But I've responded to enough people complaining about the fact that I think headshots should stun enemies every time, and I will not respond to this anymore. If you want to leave the comment, that's fine, but it will not get an answer beyond what I'm about to say right now. The gameplay in the remake is heavily improved for a number of reasons. Weapons can be easily selected. The knife is a fantastic tool that allows you to parry projectiles, one of the other things that I wanted changed. And believe it or not, I am okay with the knives breaking, because if they didn't, it'd be too powerful due to how easily parrying is. That being said, despite almost everything being perfect, the headshots still need to stun enemies. Leg shots I can see, they're too easy to pull off, that should have been changed, but shooting an enemy in the head should still stun them, allowing you to come in for the melee button prompt. A common reason people defend this is because, you guessed it, it makes the game too easy. Well, no, it doesn't. That's bullshit. This is a mechanic that relies on your accuracy. If you prepare to do this and you miss, you most likely will take damage as you won't be able to kick the enemies. If you do pull off the headshot and perform the melee, you will not only kick the guy you shot, but also anybody surrounding him. If you master this, you can take out hordes of enemies using only a handgun, assuming you have the skill to pull these off. It's the definition of a beautiful thing. In the remake, this is completely gone. I've tried it a number of times, and it's ended badly. You can still stun enemies and kick them, and most of the time I do, but it's more or less just to get rid of the enemies faster. It's no longer what it used to be. I'm not sure if you have to shoot them in a certain spot, but I haven't heard anybody else address this issue, not even IGN saying it's a good thing, so I'm going to assume that's not the case. There is an argument that parrying makes up for it, but no, it doesn't. It's way too easy to do, and if you keep doing it, then the knives are probably going to run out. Keep in mind, the kick itself no longer seems to have the range it used to anyway, so it wouldn't have made things that much easier. I just don't understand this mindset. And it didn't ruin the game for me like I thought it would, but it is the reason I've yet to decide which version I prefer. The chainsaw demo video may have been a disaster, but this is one thing that I fully stand by as something I fucking hate, and a huge step down in quality that sadly isn't getting called out too much.
Fortunately, it's not on me at the moment. And you really should be telling me what a good job I did. Busted my...
Louis Serra. It pleases me to say that Louis Serra, the ladies' man, probably offensive by today's standards, gets his own spot. The reason for this is because of all the characters in the game, he's improved upon the most if you don't count the gameplay. Despite being quite likable in the original, he did lack a lot of substance and was killed off too quickly to have much of an impact. He does still die in the remake, which is fine I guess, I can't deny I would have liked to see him live. But his death is a lot more meaningful in this, making it more of a redemption arc, and he's given a much more interesting backstory. Not to mention being brought up several times after his death, making his sacrifice feel like more than an afterthought.
Let's get rid of these things.
For Luis.
His personality is a lot more entertaining this time, making his sections one of the game's highlights. This obviously includes the barricade cabin, along with the later segments being the two El Gigantes and the aforementioned minecart ride. Both of which are heavily improved on a great deal, but having Louis along just makes it all the better. If this wasn't enough to make him one of my favorite things about the remake, he is also a co-op partner. That's somewhat useful. It says a lot.
Shocking.
As somebody who's always been a huge fan, it goes without saying that I definitely like this. If you're wondering why I only mention Louis, well...
You haven't changed a damn bit. What a disappointment.
No improved backstories. How is it that I make a whole video on things I want the remake to change, and somehow not bring this up? Louis Serra is not the only character in this game to be improved on quite heavily. They're all a lot more likable and well acted, but it's not the only thing that needed fixing. For whatever reason, basic human emotions and motivations were not considered when making the original game. Your first encounter with Ada makes absolutely no sense, considering how Resi 2 ended, being her supposed death, leading me to originally believe I must have missed something. Which I didn't. and Krauser has no motivations whatsoever outside of wanting power until the release of Darkside Chronicles 4 years later, giving us some of the backstory. You'd think that the remake would, I don't know, fix some of this because it's fucking obvious, but no, they didn't.
Positively shocking.
Ada is a bit less mysterious this time, along with offering Leon a ride off the exploding island, which he declines, but their initial reunion still makes no sense. Krauser is the biggest disappointment of all, doing almost nothing new plot-wise, and for whatever reason, I still get the feeling Leon won't be the one to finish him off, which as mentioned in the boss ranking is just stupid. The same can be said for the villains too, which I'm sorry, I just don't like as much in this. All the dialogue is missing, which I think could have been comedically redone. Sadler doesn't even appear till the end, and Mendez has a far less intimidating voice. I don't like complaining about this because the designs and most of the voice acting is a huge improvement, but there's just no getting around this. They had a chance to fix something, they blatantly ignored it, and I just don't get it. It's the only flaw that actually does get mentioned. It's not as bad as cutting out half the game, but it's still something I don't like.
So then, you will comply, yes?
Proper horror balance. What I do like is something I never really thought had to be changed, but they did a damn good job at it. Most people don't blame Resi 4 as the game that got rid of the horror theme, I certainly didn't, but the remake managed to fit in a lot more of these horror elements without losing what made the original so good. A lot of this comes down to the atmosphere itself, which you just couldn't get on the GameCube or PS2 and whatnot. But when the game has a chance to implement some of these scarier sequences, it doesn't disappoint. The section when you play as Ashley used to be fucking awful, with outright broken mechanics, which has been replaced with one of the game's scariest sections that sees you trying to avoid knights in a claustrophobic area, with only a flashlight for a defense. It does freeze the knights upon impact, but I still really enjoyed it. Something that initially concerned me was that the Gyarados wouldn't be as good in this, as it was such a cool, underrated enemy. But the remake has improved on this due to its stealth mechanic, and the inclusion of chains does make things a bit more tense. The minigun enemies are gone and replaced with something a lot more fair, and the regenerators are mostly the same, aside from a few small differences. Being you have to go a lot longer without the scope, meaning you can't kill them, and they can run now. If these things weren't terrifying enough, they now no longer walk at you at the pace of something from a 1960s zombie movie. They also transform into Iron Maidens, which is an odd change, but it's fine. The dogs are unfortunately still not fun to fight, and the Novistadors are one of the few things I don't prefer in this, as they kind of just feel cheap this time. Then again, I actually like the original version of this, so go figure. Overall, the game has what really is a perfect balance of action and horror that I have to admit outdoes the original. Again, I never thought it really needed it, but I can't say that I'm complaining. And that was 5 things I like about the Resident Evil 4 remake, and 3 that I fucking hate. I normally just say leave your thoughts down below if you don't agree, and I'll get back to you, which I will as long as it's not about the headshots, but I feel there is something else that needs to be said. Yes, despite my expectations, the Resident Evil 4 remake is good. It's very good. I don't agree with all of it, obviously, but it's still damn good. That being said, I stand by the fact that it's not the game that needed a remake the most. What happened with the Resi 2 and 3 remake is still not okay, and we can't just forget about that because this one turned out so good. Personally, I love Resi 8, so for me it's 2 for 2. But it's gonna take more than that to get me excited for a new Resident Evil game in the future, because the fact is, there's still a lot of making up to do. I am the Game Analyst, and don't forget, yes, at the end of the last thing that I liked, I did state that I enjoy fighting invisible bug enemies in the sewer. And I'll probably never say it again. Oh, what? You're actually here? That's fucking amazing. I guess you may as well check out the main channel, in which I discuss movies, TV series, and the offensive topics that lie within. If you're into that, then press the link in the description. It's right there.